which is great because that means that I'm not always having to be the one in that
Yeah.
role
Yeah,
because
yeah,
that sucks.
it's got to be really exhausting and draining having to be the heavy all the time.
Well, when you take somebody who has got the background of being the person in the family who's the bad guy and the black sheep,
Mhm.
and then they have to play that role, that just reinforces and highlights that being the bad guy. Well, everyone could have what they wanted if it weren't for me.
Yeah, 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 and it really reinforces not just the sort of validity behind it, but do you feel like there's a sense of maybe not I don't know how to phrase this. Maybe not in like a positive way, like you enjoy it, but that you get some sort of like internal resonance by doing it because it reinvokes that same old.
You've asked me about that with regard to similar things. It's in that same arena of family dynamic. And, I wish I'd been doing more writing here in the last few weeks because things have come up and there have been these little aha moments. But I just either don't do it at the time or forget to go and write it down
Yeah.
because there is something there and I cannot think of what it is now. But yeah, there is some sort of something like what you're describing at work. I don't know if it's um, the word you used was resonance. I don't know if it's just the familiarity or if there is some sense of it's not really the best possible word, not requirement, but I don't know what other word to use. Some sort of being bound to that role, and I don't know if that's the case or not. But yeah, there's something there that uh, at one point in time recently it came clear, and now I can't recall what it is.
It's okay. Um, yeah, it just seems to me it's a sort of thing which can kind of set up that confirmation of, yeah, this is what everybody's always said, this is how I've always felt. And then there's some sort of like this feels right, this feels comfortable, even though it's, the backlash of you getting yelled at by your daughter or something else where it's like, yeah, if it's true. If I wasn't here, everybody else would be better off, like that. And it gives you that kind of feeling in the body that's like a sick comfort. Like it's not really comforting, but it's like it feels familiar in a way that feels like
Yes,
I know this.
and you're right about all of that because I can think about times, and it was regular. I mean, it was probably daily prior to that summer of 2020 when everything shifted. Um, that prior to that, things had gotten so bad that that was the case on a daily basis, the way you just described it. And um, yeah, you're right. It's not comfortable, but it is familiar.
Hmm.
And God, I wish I could remember how you said it. You said something that summed it up with near perfection. Um, this sense of um, yeah, this is. I'll use
Hmm.
words that are different than what you use, but it's a
Yeah.
sense of yeah, this makes sense. This is how it's always been. You
Hmm.
know, why would it be any other way?
Yeah. 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 So when that sort of feeling comes up, it's really helpful to recognize it and not immediately fall into the story of it. Like I was saying to Kristen about the assumption that we really do have a storehouse of unresolved pain. It's that feeling of, okay, this is a familiar sense. There's a familiar narrative happening right now that I am always the bad guy. I'm playing my role. This is the role I was put here for. I guess, that's what I'm going to do. And it's like this, that is this other, it in itself, it's actually essentially a reaction to feeling the discomfort that's in the body that's been there so long. And so it feels like if you just give into it or find some sort of resignation about it, it seems like at first that that's sort of a positive step. But in fact, what we're doing is just avoiding being with the actual discomfort of feeling like somebody feels like we're the bad guy.
Hmm.
You know, you're not comfortable in that position really. So there's a
Right.
discomfort there. So we can go either, to the we can use rage or eating or alcohol or drugs or something else, or we can, all that to deflect from it so that we don't feel that pain, or we can do the, you know what, I guess that's just me, that's the way it's going to be, and then buying into the story of it and then using that story. It's still a way of distracting from actually just being with the raw discomfort there that's in that moment. And so instead, I would suggest to be with the sensations that are there, recognize that the story isn't really part of it, that the idea that there is a you who has always been the bad guy and who is the bad guy in this situation and will always be the bad guy, that itself is this added assumption that is not talking about or referring to anyone. So what you have is a sensation that's happening in the body, and you have a story that's playing into this old narrative that has no relevance to anything really. And recognizing that that's there, it can be there, but you don't have to lock into it and feel like it's you. And if it does feel like it's you, then look into, well, who is this actually pointing to? Who is the bad guy here? Like, is it the body? Is it something in the body? Like, what is the actual bad guy who has this role?
When you say what, could
Eh,
you also say where?
yeah, both things. So it's like if where does it feel like it's located and what does it seem to be? Thanks. And so you have sensations, you have thoughts about this hypothetical creature who has been living this life always in the always in the bad guy role or something like that. We're trying to find out who that is, who this is really referring to. Can we, while we're doing that, be with the sensations as they are in the body? Are they really that bad? Can we just be with them? Is there a problem here to just being with the sensation of being in that position? And then feeling that like it's about being direct with what's happening in the moment, in the experience. Um, where right now is the problem of, your daughter is mad at you because you said she shouldn't have junk food. Okay. So there is a moment of interaction there where she gets mad. It activates in you this old belief that, it's not okay when somebody is mad at me because there's danger here. So I have to keep everybody at peace. So there's going to be discomfort in the body because somebody is currently upset with you. And then there's this whole idea that this is me, this is my role, I'm the heavy, I'm the bad guy, I'm problem one. And all of that's going on. And that's all creating more sensation in the body that's making you want to escape and evacuate. But really, what's happening there is just this raw moment of interaction with another person where that person is expressing some sort of discomfort, and you are standing there expressing what you think is the truth of the situation, that she shouldn't be eating junk food. She's upset. You have sensation in the body. That's all that's happening. It's not creating another story. It's not pointing to, it's not dredging up the past 40 years of your life. It's none of that. It's just this one moment of experience happening. we don't have to create the entire timeline out of it. And you can just be there in that moment with sensation that's happening, because that doesn't have to go away. You can still feel that discomfort of being in this sensation, in this situation. And then just have the space to just be there. You can also feel, doing the sort of loving practices that we've been doing, it can be helpful to feel love for both of you in this situation. Feel love and compassion for the discomfort that's going on in this body because it feels unsafe, and feel love and compassion for the one in her body because she feels unsafe, unheard, unloved, whatever's going on in her, we don't know exactly.
Right.
And then you can also take that opportunity to go back to younger versions of you where, in doing the reparenting stuff, also great. But we can do all of that without it coming from a place where we really believe that this is me, who is the bad guy, who has to go back to the past to heal the younger versions of that same bad guy. It's like we're able to we're able to use imagination to go back to these times that we think happened the way that we think they did. The love and the compassion and the acceptance and all of that is wonderfully wonderful when it's felt now. And it's wonderful when it's felt now, and it's expressed to memories about the past. But ultimately, what's super, super important is to recognize in this moment that it's not really a narrative Darrell who has been going this entire time. That like, I think we have we can run into the issue of feeling like you have like a train, right? And
Right.
it's like there's we feel like there's a problem in the train all the way across. There's like, it's been damaged in some way all the way across the entire line of the train from the front to the back. And we feel like we're still like here at the front of the engine, and we're able to kind of heal our way back to all the other little cars in the train all the way back. And we feel as though, it's that whole train is me. Like I'm here, but I'm able to feel those earlier parts of the train because we're all still connected. We're still that same connected train. But there is no train. It doesn't really exist, right? You have a thought of a train, you have an experience happening right here, and you have thoughts, which a memory is just a type of thought. We know that they're not really very accurate, but they are
Right.
also happening right here. And then you have an idea that this is a whole train that's connected, but this is just an imaginary train, and all you have is this little moment right here. And whether it's expressing as openness and boundlessness and interconnectedness, or if it's, uncomfortable sensation and thoughts happening, or if it's discomfort in the body, a thought about a train, and then the spaciousness to recognize that that thought train is just thought. It's not real. All I have is right here. Whatever's happening is happening right here. Even if you're imagining, sending love to 6-year-old Darrell, and you're like really there and feeling the love and walking him through, whatever he needs in that moment, it's still happening, right here. You're not
Right.
literally walking through the train to get back to that last car on the, in the caboose. You're still right here, right?
Well, that's slowly becoming easier to accept. Um, when you first suggested that idea a while back, that uh, if there's something I'm doing in the house and it's something I've done countless times before, that it's not that this is 9,722nd time. This is this time, and all of those other times are no longer. They're irrelevant. They're no longer. They don't exist.
No.
And at first, that was hard to accept because something would come up. I'd go to do it, and that conversation would come to mind, and I'd think, well, if that's the case, then boy, I wish I could really remember the thought processes. But without being able to convey how I was thinking about it, it was still the sense of those things have happened before. Mm-hmm. So, how do I, I'm denying that. Well, it's shifted. And I think just out of necessity, because if you continue to hold on to that story, then it creates, a fair degree of unhappiness and stress in that moment. And so what choice are you going to make? So over so many weeks, it's gradually moved away from that to, okay, this is the only thing that's happening right now. This instance of it, this is all that's happening. Yeah. Setting aside all of the times that you can recall that have happened before, because those are done, they're over, they're not present. This is all that's happening, kind of along the lines of what you were just saying, yeah. Or very much along the lines of what you were just saying. And that's become easier to work with and take as true, rather than accepting this idea of a long series of all the times that I've had to do any of the various things that come up on a daily basis in the house. Yeah. So it's getting easier.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear.
And while we're on the subject, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's always helpful to recognize that if you didn't have a functioning memory, how, like put yourself in the position of like, how would I be experiencing this moment if I didn't have a functional memory?
And that's when things began to turn, actually, was when you said that in the email, because I remember, I don't know if you mentioned it in the email or if it was something that I recalled on my own, but somehow in all of that, that movie Memento came up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's sort of been the guiding principle through all of that is, because as you said, memory is just a type of thought, and it is very unreliable, grossly unreliable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's helped a lot. And something you said about the affirmations, that's actually what I started doing on my own here over the last month or so, is that when these situations would come up where that sense of being the bad guy comes into being, that, just kind of intuitively move towards practicing those in that moment.
Amazing.
It was good for you to say it, though, because I was not sure about if that was really the right thing to do or the right time to do it, but I was doing it anyway for lack of anything else to use at the moment. But doing those affirmations and doing the reparenting, this stuff is starting to gradually shift. It keeps shifting. Like the other day, there was, I don't recall what, something happened, and there was that sense of that being that character in the moment, and but it didn't happen. It didn't catch. And so I remember kind of walking away from the situation, realizing that, oh wow, we just averted a tribunal.
Amazing.
And then last night, something happened where Suzanne actually wasn't upset. She was just in a lot of pain. And so she, when someone's in a lot of pain, the way they can react, it seems like they're upset. They're not really upset, or they're not upset with you. They just hurt. Yeah. And so something happened, and that got internalized, and that was taken as, oh, well, you did it again. You should have kept your mouth shut rather than saying something and upsetting them. And it lasted for a while. There was kind of walking around feeling kind of hurt and wounded for a while, and then it faded, but it didn't turn into the sort of thing that it really, the kind of thing with the big, well, like I said a minute ago, the tribunal, just, taking that big hammer to yourself repeatedly for however long, for an afternoon or for a whole day.
Yeah.
It didn't go there. I mean, yeah, it still happened, but a much reduced version of the kinds of things that have been the a very reliable reaction for however many years.
Well, that's excellent. And that's how it can start. It doesn't have to be an all and then nothing kind of situation. It's like the programming starts to change, the habits, the habitual reactions start to change, the process that occurs in every one of these situations starts to take a new flavor, and it starts to kind of loosen up all of those old ways of navigating the world. So
Yeah, and
it's amazing.
it's funny, I'd never thought about it in terms of being an all or nothing, which that might have been, that might not be an unusual expectation for me to have, but in this case, it didn't. In this case, just the fact that anything has changed at all,
Yeah,
whether it's a lot or not much, still something's changed, and that's really the response to that has been, well, that's enough.
yeah, that's amazing. I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah.
Well, I have this long-standing habit of measuring things in 1 and 5 year increments. Now, I don't dwell there, but I'll be curious to
Okay.
see what this looks like, say, you know, uh, fall or winter of next year, let alone down the line.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there will come a day when all of that stuff will have turned around dramatically and maybe even be completely eliminated. I don't know. I'm not going to set any expectations, but um, still, I'll be curious to see what this looks like down the line. I mean, because it's already, it's already undone something that, um, I'm kind of like Woody Allen. I've had way too much therapy, um, and my mom started putting me in therapy when I was a kid, which I think is really telling. Um,
Yeah.
and after all of these years of therapy and therapists and self work and 12-step work and what have you, it's interesting that this stuff never really budged,
Yeah.
let alone it never really had been identified,
That's amazing. That's
and so now in a short space of time, it's been identified, and now it's really beginning to kind of unravel.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really,
it is.
really, really pleased to see that. Yeah, yeah. So I have to. I'm sure that any of this feels like a wonderful bonus after all of those years of just believing that it has to be this way. Like,
it's I don't know if I would describe it as that. I mean, because it seems like more than just a bonus. I mean, a bonus is, well, on top of all this other stuff, you got this. Instead, it's more like actually winning the prize.
that's
You
amazing.
know?
Yeah, yeah. That's so good. Yeah, I mean, and it all comes down to the fact that you've been so willing to dig in and actually do the work, do the investigations, be introspective and open to trying the things. And so it's huge, you know.
Well, I guess that's what all the therapy and all the 12-step work over all of these years
Yeah,
has done. I mean, if it didn't do anything else, at least it set the stage for being able and willing
yeah,
to do this.
yeah,
You know, so
absolutely.
and I need to go back and watch the video or reread my notes because we've talked about it a couple of times now,
Mhm.
and all I'm left with after the fact is sort of this general notion of what it means. So without getting necessarily into the details of what it means or defining it, this is all second Fetter stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's pretty safe to say that. Yeah,
Well, it seems like what is often the case um, with first fetter is that it seems like frequently people report some kind of aha moment, some sort of moment where all of a sudden, the veil is lifted.
Yeah.
But what I'm kind of wondering, how does this tend to happen with the second fetter? Is it something that's just gradual, or does there come a point in time where something happens and there's a decisive moment where everything just kind of turns a corner? Or
No, I would say, because we're working with it, it's okay. So I think it depends on the framework that you're using to define second fetter. So
okay,
the way that we work with it, it involves all of the emotional hangups and all of the trauma stuff and all of that. And it's super, we always say it's really helpful because of what we've talked about with the foundational triangle being connected and all of that. It's really useful to get at this early on. Um, the way that like the Kevin's model, they kind of don't address it at all. And then we now find that
oh,
actually, he was at the POK meeting, a couple months ago saying that he's now doing EMDR and he's in therapy now after doing all of the 10 fetters because he never actually did any of that stuff. And so even after 8 years after doing all of the therapy or after doing all the fetter stuff, he said in the POK meeting that he can't pay a person a compliment because it felt like it was like a zero-sum game and he was losing something from by paying somebody a compliment because he had all this old trauma stuff that hadn't been worked through. So he went and did that. And I actually just spoke to somebody yesterday who was working with Christiane for a while, and apparently Christiane has gone into therapy now and she's done a bunch of stuff after it. And so now she says that the therapy is like the 11th fetter. So because in their practice they don't address that with a second. They just say the first three just fall all at once, which is like the traditional Buddhist
right.
framework that we talked about. But the way we work with it, it is at the root of all of this stuff. Having these emotional and trauma hangups are something that you got to deal with one way or another, and it makes the rest of it so much easier if this stuff has been dealt with. Um, it's not to say that it's going to be an all and then, oh, hey, I'm free of trauma. This stuff can still take years and years and it'll come back, but it's having a certain amount of spaciousness, resolution that you recognize that like this stuff isn't feeding into that same self cycle anymore. And if it does, you recognize it immediately, like, oh, there's that thing again, and then you can have love, you can have space, you can have compassion, all of that, but it's not taken seriously. It doesn't have those hooks that, yes, I am the bad one, yeah, that's true. It's really talking about me. It's like, oh, I see you again, there it is, and it's like, it feels there. You might feel anxious. You might feel heavy or sad or whatever, but it's like, yeah, okay, I know that's still there. So let's just do some more work with that. So it's not like it has to be completely gone all time and forever, and you'll be totally free of all of this stuff before you move on. It's just something that it like loosens up more and more and more. And then as you're doing 4 and 5 stuff, some of this stuff will come back. As you're doing 6, this stuff will come back. As you're doing, whatever you're working with, this stuff is going to keep coming back. So you get to work with it in different ways, and have more release of it as time goes on. So, I mean, we still have, there's still stuff in there that I'm working with. That's like, yep, that didn't realize that was still there. Oh, okay, let's take a look. And then, Pernilla still has stuff that like she's talked about in her groups that like after all these years, it's like, oh wow, that came out of nowhere. Okay. And then we just sit with it and we work with it. But what's amazing is that when you have worked with the higher fetters, this stuff becomes so much faster to deal with. So instead of it
Hmm.
being like months and months on an issue or something, like she talked about the one instance where we were we were we were having lunch and she had made a salad dressing and she's like, do you want some of this? And I was like, no, that's okay, I've got this. And she immediately felt in her this like reaction of like, like this thing. And it was because she remembered back to a time when she was a little girl and she wanted her father to try something. And so she gave him a spoon with it and he put salt on it before he ate it. And that as a little girl was taken as just utter rejection. And so immediately it was like, so then when she had asked about the dressing, I said no. And then, I could see, I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, it's fine. I'll have dressing. But she immediately looked into it and felt into it, went back to it, and within the span of like 5 minutes, like, okay, that's resolved. Like that was gone. Just didn't realize it was still there. So there's no feeding into it like part of her whole narrative and all of that. It's just like, oh, okay, that brought up a reaction. Well, let's take a look at that thing. And oh, okay, thank you. Done. So, and then it wasn't an issue going up forward. So it's like it's that kind of a thing where they can still be there, but they don't have that same sort of that they once did.
Right. Well, a couple of things. One is I'm still kind of hung up on the idea of Kevin and Christiane. How are they able to go through the later Fetters and get the results they did with all of that stuff still weighing them down? I don't understand. I mean, I sit on the Tansha. I don't know if how
Yeah.
familiar you are with her. She runs a Fetter work meeting every Thursday.
Yeah.
And hardly a Thursday goes by where somebody doesn't say something about how they're in the later Fetters and something comes up. And they're like, Thursday before last, there's one guy from over in the UK who's talking about how he had to go back because there was this subtle first Fetter identification thing at work, and he had to go back and do something about it. So I really am just perplexed as heck at saying, hey, I've worked through all 10 Fetters and gotten the results, but yet there's still all of that really heavy, dense, weighty stuff
Yeah.
that's you're carrying with you.
I
I mean,
know.
I just can't wrap my head around that.
I'm with you, and that's why we talk about it the way that we do. No disrespect to them, because I love,
Sure.
he's got so many incredible pointers, and I
Yeah.
worked with Christiane, at one point. So no disrespect there, but I think that's the case, is that's why we look at it like a wheel as opposed to this stepwise thing. Because if you have that, then you have sort of built into that idea of the hierarchy that, well, if I'm working on 7, then I can't possibly have any 1 stuff left. And then when something comes that's clearly a first Fetter issue, it's like, it can be like a blow to that first Fetter ego that's like, oh shit, I'm actually not where I thought I was. Now I'm down. So maybe that was just my leading edge. Maybe my trailing edge is still back in 1. And then it creates this whole extra thing. Whereas what it really seems like is that it's just this amorphous process. There's no direct linearity. There are some connections where if you have like for a lot of people, when 4 and 5, the aversion and craving, start to let go, they
Mm-hmm.
will often start to have 6th Fetter perceptual shifts and things that just come like as part and parcel with that. And it doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to a lot of people, where it's like as soon as that stuff starts to be letting go of, that subject object thing starts to change on its own, because your the whole push pull of 4 and 5 is no longer there. So you're not pushing the world away from you, and you're not pulling things towards you. That if that push pull isn't happening, then there's just kind of a collapse. There's nothing to, there's nothing pushing and there's nothing pulling. It starts to become that felt sort of unity. So that can happen for people. But it's not to say that, a lot of people have non-dual experiences of everything collapsing and feeling one with everything long before they've done all the work with 4 and 5. But it's usually not like a stable thing. It's like you have these
Right.
experiences and then it's a honeymoon and then it goes back and then you do more work. But that's why, then stuff comes up. You're in a new situation where it triggers some old thing that you didn't think was an issue anymore, and it came up. So then we just work with it. And it just becomes an interesting process where it's all kind of, we're navigating it all together, so that whatever arises is where you are and is what's happening in this moment. To consider it otherwise is creating a permanent self. If we have the idea that like I start at first Fetter, I see through it, Now I'm up to fifth fetter and I've seen through that. Now I'm up to seventh fetter. I've seen through that. Who the hell is that? Like you're implying a permanent self that is seeing through things and checking off boxes and becoming less and less of itself or something. But
Yeah.
the implication there that there is a me who now has to go back to the first fetter and I'm doing that. It's reifying that whole notion that you're trying to see through.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the kind of stuff that tends to get overlooked. The kind
Yeah,
of subtle stuff that will hang you up, and then you have to hope that you are able to track it down and become aware of it and track it down at some point.
exactly. So the way I look at it is it's like where you are right now in this moment is where you are. Like that's all that there is. And even to say that you are is the wrong phrasing of it. Like if in this moment there is no no craving for things to be other than they are, no resistance to things being the way they are, that experience is a post fifth fetter experience, right?
Right.
If in this moment there it seems to be no subject here separate from any objects out there, we would say that's like a post sixth fetter moment. That's an expression of a post sixth fetter way of being. If you are completely in flow and just there doesn't seem to be any self here and it's just, life moving and doing its thing, then that's a ninth fetter experience. In the next moment, you might be, freaking out about your taxes and, all up in your head and feeling like you're in some sort of mortal danger for it. Okay. First fetter moment, like here it is. But it doesn't indicate that there is a you who is doing all this. It's like this is the expression of life in this moment.
Right. Well, to that end, the way I have thought about it for a while was a result of listening to Pernilla talk. I think it was on a POK meeting, and she it was on this general subject of the fact that it's not linear. And I'm listening to her talk, and then I realized, well, this is just one big fractal,
Yeah.
and that's how I think of it now. It's just a big
Love that.
fractal.
Yep. Like it reminds me, I went to well, it was a virtual Shinzen Young retreat a couple of years ago, and they have at night they have a thing where people can say what's going on with them, and there was a woman who was utterly in tears because she had been wanting this for so long, and then the way that it showed up for her was so extreme that it was like destabilizing. She had little kids, and it was like she was having a hard time dealing because she had this, big shift all at once where all of a sudden, her vision was two-dimensional. She had no sense of time. Like, she couldn't tell 5 minutes from an hour or something. And like the whole collapse of the feeling of a self and all that stuff just collapsed at once. And it was so she was like crying because it was like, this is what I've always wanted. And yet, it came in such a like strong, kind of harsh, intense package that it was like totally destabilizing. She didn't have time to really like acclimate it into her life while trying to take care of kids and doing all this stuff. And so it was like I immediately heard it and recognized like, oh, well, that's Fetter 6 and Fetter 7. And like you could see that. And I think because, she wasn't obviously doing it that way, she was just doing like meditation practice and it just kind of happened. Um, I think having a sort of systematic approach puts it in a way that it seems manageable and uh predictable, even though we don't know exactly how it's going to, it's like, yeah, okay, that's just six fetter, that's good. That's a good thing. Great. Keep up with that. That's seven. It's okay. Don't get freaked out. We expect that to happen. So it's like you have a support system in a way by having some knowledge of the terrain before you actually embark on it. But beyond that, again, it's that old adage of not confusing the map for the terrain. It gives us an
Yeah.
idea of it. It's helpful, but yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's the thing is
Okay.
I think there are different like it's like when we use the like traditional reparenting of, picturing our younger self and doing all of that, that's kind of like the first step of it. It's like the entry level where it's easy to do. It's, it's powerful. It does have benefit. Um, it helps us get to the point where we're able to feel a sense of love and compassion and bring it back to something that feels like it's us, especially if we come from a place where we are not able to feel love for our current selves. It's a way of kind of tricking the system to having love for ourselves without recognizing that we're really having love for ourselves, So it's like a workaround to start with to ease you into the ability to feel that love and compassion for what's there and to kind of reprogram the system. Ultimately, yes, though, the more adept you get at this, the more you've done, and the more you get to the point where, you know, there's less self and all of that stuff, it is more possible to just in the present moment, being here, recognizing that something comes up, feeling into what is actually happening. There's a fine line between using direct experience to just bypass everything and just be like, yep, doesn't happen, doesn't, there's nothing there. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And we don't want to do that. We want to be really honest with what's showing up. If what is showing up right now is strong sensation in the body, if there are thoughts about, past shoulds and shouldn'ts and things like that, recognize that they're there, but have that sense of spaciousness in this moment to recognize what is really there, not to make it into the storehouse of pain, but just that, I don't know, there's sensation in a rib. There's some thoughts about I should or I shouldn't do this. There's a feeling of discomfort. Okay, and just be with that. Be kind of loving towards yourself as you do this so that you're not doing it as like a punishment or there's nothing like that. But just allowing that to sort of move through is, you're right. It's the more subtle form of reparenting where you're allowing whatever is there to be there like you weren't able to do as a child. And it's just like, yeah, it's there. You can see it from the perspective where it's not the big boogeyman that you thought it was. It's just a sensation, just some thoughts, and it's gone. So what else has been going on, Darrell?
Well, kind of wanted to follow up on what I emailed you about. I guess was it over the weekend, whenever that was.
Yeah.
That there was that. Don't know what else to call it. Moment of insight. I'm still not really entirely sure what was seen. Something was seen, and it's hard to talk about to pin it down with language real clearly. Then after that, I mean, all of a sudden, all of that emotional heaviness that had been weighing on me. Now, to be clear, kind of recap here, that had been going on for 2 or 3 weeks, and it kept changing. It kind of kept changing form, or the way it was taken would change, because the first 3 to 5 days or so of that, it was almost kind of like, great. I mean, there was all this really heavy grief, but it was like, hey, this is great. Finally getting some movement. Something's finally happening around us. See, that very instance, that thing that I remembered about my dad and being spanked,
Yeah.
that came up back in with a therapist in the early or mid 90s. And I even remember the therapist talking about how that's physical and emotional abuse. She was really clear about that.
Yep.
And I've had a lot of therapists. She was one of the very few really good ones. And so, I even still now, I look back on that, I don't doubt, that what she said, the truth of it, or the reliability. At any rate, but there was, even with having somebody say that to me, it was sort of like, oh, okay, yeah, and nothing.
Yeah.
But, you send me some questions by email, I print it out, I take it. I mean, I haven't even I physically got myself in the chair before. I mean, I'm going to sit in the chair, and all of a sudden this memory is just rushing up seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I write everything out, and then, the wheels fall off, for 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and then turns on a dime one night. I'm, getting ready for bed, and brushing teeth, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, pow, like there's this seeing. It had something to do with identifying with experience, is what it seemed like. And I mean, it wasn't completely gone, but it was at enough of a distance or enough into the background that there was this great sense of relief. Like, oh, wow, okay, all right, great. Getting a
Yeah.
break from it. And the next day, everything was very light. I was in a great place all day, a lot of energy. And then it started to come back, but it still has not returned with the weight or intensity that it's had for the last few weeks.
That's amazing. Yeah. Beautiful.
I'm perplexed. I mean, I really am. I mean, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. It's just, it's kind of mind boggling, because like all of that was so heavy, and then it just turns on a dime.
Yeah.
What in the hell?
I know. I know. Best not to think about it. It's actually, it's one of those things where it's a because we don't really know how any of the system works, right? We don't really know how we're working through these things. We just know that what generally happens is once you work through them, you get to experience them in these ways. Oftentimes it will be, an issue will just kind of go on its own. It's something that just needs to do its thing, work its way out. And what's really crazy is that, like, I've even had experiences where, like, I'll forget something ever happened that was like an issue. And like Pernilla will be like, so yeah, do you remember this connects to blah blah blah? It's like, I don't remember that. It's like what used to be such a big thing is like, did that happen? I don't yeah, it's no longer an issue, and it doesn't have to be in the sort of stored narrative banks anymore. So
Hmm.
um it's why I think it's best to just be with what is as it arises, and not try to like cling to it's an ironic kind of clinging, right? It's like, I don't want it to be there, really glad that it's gone, but why the hell did it go away? Like it's like this attachment to needing to know how it worked, why it happened the way it did. And that can be like, there can be a fear that, maybe it's just hiding, like the it's like the end of every horror movie where it's like, they're dead. Are they? Like the hand comes up out of the ground or something. Like, is it gonna come back all of a sudden? And or is it because, like, we want to know how it happened so we can do it easily another time? Or, like, we have all these hooks into it. It's just, this is the way the process just kind of works itself out.
Well, it's more just, I guess, disbelief,
Yeah.
because the fact that it can go from such just incredible, just dragging you down heaviness, and then poof. I mean, it's no, it doesn't work like that. That can't happen,
I
but it
know.
did.
It did.
And here's the interesting detail on the other side of that, is that I noticed the following few days that there was a lot of restlessness.
Mm.
Now, I'm somebody who's always been, I have a tendency to kind of want to be doing something, even if I'm not moving, even if I'm not up moving around. It used to be I like to be up moving around, but I
Mm.
mean, I can sit here and, work on stuff, fix things, rewire something, what have you, as long as I'm doing something.
Yeah.
Um, um, but this was different. This was a genuine restlessness. I mean, different enough that I recognized it as like, wow, I really just feel unable to sit still. I really feel like I need to be moving around. I need to be doing something.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that was really peculiar.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those times where it's really good to get into the body and see, okay, why am I restless? What am I resisting right now? Because that movement is keeping you from feeling something.
Okay.
So
I wish I'd known that at the time, because I really could have
yeah.
dug into that, but I had no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. That kind of that sort of the restless energy of having to do is a way so that you don't have to feel.
Hmm.
It's there's so many people who are like that. Like they can't sit down and be quiet for a moment because they're either running from physical sensations in the body or thoughts. And if you settle down for a moment, you actually notice what's going on up here and what's going on in here, and that can be really unbearable.
Well, that's kind of a weird contradiction for me then, because there are times where I can just sit or go lay down. Um, there's a picture of me that Susanna has of me sitting on the couch. She likes to take pictures of us when we don't know she's doing it.
That's awesome.
And it almost looks like I'm praying. And she made some sort of comment about how she sees me like that a lot.
Really?
So I can sit still. I mean, even outside of meditating, I can sit still. There are times where it's nice to just sit down and just not do anything and just be. Um, so I don't know. I guess this is something that will get looked into over time. But that restlessness really caught my attention because it normally doesn't feel that driven.
Yeah.
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 Normally it's nice to be doing something. If you're up and it's daylight hours, it's just nice to be doing something. Um, but this was more like, I have to.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of choice in it. Like, you're going to move.
Yeah. And so it's really curious in those moments. It's really interesting if in those moments you just get curious and be like, all right,
Okay.
I see you. What am I avoiding? What's happening right now? Just check in. Because
Okay.
and I'm curious, even when you sit and you are, just quietly doing nothing, is the mind completely still, or are there thoughts and other things happening at that point?
Hard to say because I would have to actually notice when it's happening. But usually, what's going on, I guess the mind isn't still. It's not so much thought so much as it is just taking in what's there.
Mm,
Like the pattern of sunlight on the floor, or
mm,
watching the trees move in the breeze, or watching the dogs run around out back. Just
mm.
taking in what's there, and really just kind of feeling that, kind of being with it, because there really is something very remarkable about just noticing life as it's happening.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really good.
So
Yeah.
I think the thing is just for all of the quality that brings, there's not enough of that that's done. Need to do more of it.
Isn't it funny? It's like it's also really interesting to look into why is there the resistance to doing that? Is there a feeling that like it's somehow shirking your duties in some way of doing other things or
Well, that's one of the many questions you've asked me that I kind of have this general, I don't know, sort of mental list of things that you've asked me about, and sometimes these things will come up, and I haven't looked into that yet, and that's one of those. There's some of the stuff that has been looked into, and there's some of the stuff that just, and not yet. So,
I ask a lot. It's understandable.
no, it's fine. It really is. I mean, they're all very good and valuable questions, and taking the time to look into any of the ones that I've taken the time to look into, it's all borne fruit. It's all been worthwhile. Um, it's just, I was trying to think of a way to try to tackle all of this stuff um, systematically so that nothing got forgotten. And then it hit me a week or two ago. I thought, you know what? Let's just pick one or two, maybe on the outside, a third thing, and just go with that for a while. And then we can come to these other things because they're all printed out. And in fact, because of that, not the last group session, but the last group session I was at,
Yeah, yeah.
you laid out a lot of stuff, and that was the one where I went and transcribed everything from the video
Love
and
those.
then condensed it, and then finally wrote it down in the journal in an even more condensed form. Um, and so it's all there. It's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
Uh, it's just a matter of getting to things, and that'll happen in time because right now there's there, the what has been investigated has um, created enough to work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not like there hasn't,
Doubt.
huh?
Without doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's calmed down, which means, maybe now it's time to start looking at something else, and that might be a good one.
Yeah.
And tying into that kind of a peripherally, God, I can't believe it's been a year. It was March of last year that I worked with a woman who, wife of a guy I know and perfectly okay,
Mm.
and she's a therapist of some sort. They have all these different trainings and modalities, and I don't even remember how it came up now, but it's something about meditation and that I'd been doing it, for what, 18 or 19 years. And now there was all this striving associated with it. Thank you, Chula. Um, and she said, well, why don't you take a break from it? Which, here's that word again, was getting used earlier. That was almost heretical.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you saying, woman? Um,
Oh.
and, but I went ahead and took the suggestion.
Yeah.
And now I can't seem to get back to it. And I've tried.
So funny. It's like that though. Like I had a year where it was over a year. I did yoga every single morning and it was like I felt great. It was amazing. Flexibility went through the roof and everything was great. And then but there was this undercurrent of like there was guilt if I didn't do it. And it felt like there was this like every day, even if it was just 15 or 20 minutes, like I had to do some yoga. So I had it like on the calendar, like, yep, did it today, didn't miss my streak, that sort of thing. And then Pernilla got here last year, and then it was like things just didn't have time to do it all the time. And then we were in Europe and there's just like, no place, and occasionally got to do it a little bit. And then it just like have not gotten back into it. Some days I'll do it, but there's no like there aren't the hooks to it that I don't feel that guilt for not doing it anymore. And so when it
Hmm.
feels right, I do it, and if not, I don't. But it's not having that sense of like it's that third fetter issue of like doing it for a purpose, like and
Uh,
so if you had that the idea that you had to meditate for this purpose, you're striving,
yes.
striving, striving, striving. If you lose well, okay, there are other, maybe the reason that you thought you were doing it is no longer there, or that you can, have all sorts of insights without meditating. And maybe you
Yeah.
just don't genuinely enjoy meditating like you used to. Go with that. There's no the idea that you have to do it for a purpose is what is, our third fetter binding you into this idea of what you should be doing, even when you don't feel like doing that thing. And that's what brings us to the ninth fetter of doing what feels right in the moment and not having this ulterior idea that, there should be some other motivation there for it, or I'm doing it because I have to get something out of this, or, I can only enjoy doing it if there's a positive outcome at the end of it. You know, something can't be done just for its own sake, or something can't not be done for its own sake.
Well, everything you're saying, it kind of made it clear that even in trying to resume sitting practice here in the last few months, it once again had to quality over it. So if it's going to happen, it's going to have to happen organically. It can't happen with any of this. You need to do this. You ought to do this. It can't have any of the. I don't know how to categorize all of this kind of stuff, but it can't have something about it where you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to have to be completely devoid of that, because that was so much of so much striving for so long, and um, that's as productive and beneficial as meditation was. I mean, I think a lot of things that have happened since the Finder's course and then finding my way to this um, are a direct result of the sitting practice and the things that happened as a result of that. But like you said, I mean, there are all kinds of insights and developments and unfoldings happening, and I haven't regularly sat on a cushion, for 12 months now.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's nothing against meditation. It's just it has its time and
Oh,
place. And there might be a time
right.
when you're like all of a sudden like, yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited to get back on the cushion and like every day it just becomes a thing and then that becomes a thing. That's fine. There's nothing no good or bad about meditation. It's just at this moment it sounds like for whatever reason it's not where you are and that's perfectly okay. No worries.
So I know you're not feeling so great, and you've got something coming up. So real
I
quick,
do. Yeah.
let's touch on this one thing, and then um, call it a day. But so that moment of insight, it's almost impossible to talk about. There, all of a sudden, there was this. Um, the way it showed up was this empty, this open space, and the idea that you're identifying with this open space, which I think really translates into identifying with experience. And that was seen, and the classic aha moment, and then something shifted, and I've already told you, all of the heavy emotions went away. Something else happened that normally would have set off you know,
Hi, Kristen.
uh, uh, the whole bad guy routine and all of that, and or not set it off. It was I was touching something where there was fear
Yeah.
because that fear of that arising, and that fear was so far removed that I was able to pretty easily say what I wanted to say
Yep.
without the fear stopping me or making it difficult. And the sense at the time was that, and I know there's no way to say, especially when it's happened to somebody else and they're relating it to you, but the sense was that this thing that seems to be tying Darrell down to a sense of someoneness took another hit.
Hmm. Yeah.
And the fact that it affected all of that heavy emotionality, there's just sort of this automatic assumption that somehow this ties into the second fetter, but I couldn't make that. That didn't make any sense because we know what the second fetter is about, and this seemed to be identifying with experience, which seems much more generalized or broad.
Well, if it comes down to the sort of identification with experience in general, that's a little bit more eighth fettery. It's
Mm-hmm.
that generalized sense of I am that, people often equate with the universe or consciousness or awareness or something like that. So it's that sort of more spaciousness feeling of like, all right, I'm not limited to inside this body or this personality. I am in contact with or I am everything. It's this feeling of just being expansive. And so we can kind of like use that to a certain extent at a point where it's a wonderful place to be. And it does free up these more small, contracted personal senses of self, which is super, super useful. Eventually, we do get to also seeing through that big cosmic identification as well. But it's really, it's great to be also in contact with that and being able to use that for that, because that's where like a lot of people have their big experience of no self and then non-duality and all of that. Sometimes that comes with that feeling of just like that, yes, that big identification with awareness. Still identification though, but it's fine. It's fine at this point to also feel that and to, enjoy that expansive feeling where all of this is just irrelevant. This doesn't make a me. This now makes a me. Okay. 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 That's fine. That's fine. Use that for a while. See what comes out of it. Um,
Okay.
but I think that's where where a lot of that is, where it's like tapping into that more expansive nature helps us put a lot of this stuff into context also.
Hmm.
The issues of the personality and the personal narrative and all of that stuff, and even discomfort in the body doesn't seem that important or that overwhelming if now all of a sudden I'm the space around, and I'm even bigger than my room and all of that. It's like it it
Huh.
yeah, again, it's not the whole enchilada, but it's a really good way of putting all of this stuff into perspective.
Well, it didn't even feel like that. It didn't feel expansive so much as it just felt like withdrawing or being cutting the cord between there being someone here that is identifying with sight and sound and body sensation, but especially it really seemed to be something to do with identifying with open space as well as the experience that it contains.
Yeah.
But so if all of that heavy emotion dropped away, is it okay to just it dropped away and walk away from it? I mean, because I've spent the last few weeks every time it came up, feeling it, really feeling it, and letting it happen.
Absolutely. There's no point in dredging it up now just for the sake of trying to dredge it up. If it comes back again, then we're not bypassing it and saying, no, been done with you. You don't exist. Then you just do it again. But there's no point in trying to, like the wound is healed. So I'm gonna go get a razor and like open it up again. Like I know you're gonna hurt. You hurt before, you're gonna hurt again, damn it. We don't there's no point in that, right? We're not trying to bypass anything, but we're just recognizing if it's not there, it's not there. If it gets touched again and it comes up, then you engage it again.
It still comes up. It's extremely mild and it's very brief. Usually, what happens, in the last few days when it comes up, I'll recognize it and put the attention on it. But the act of putting attention on it, kind of,
Yeah.
you come in. You're okay. There you are. Come into awareness. Like the minute that is known, it's like it just evaporates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't go chasing it. It's just weird. It's like, okay, well, you showed up. I turned to notice you, which I thought was probably what you wanted. And then when I notice you, you run off.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So it's okay. See what happens. Keep up. If it comes up, take a look. Feel free to feel it. You have the place where you can really experience it from, and it's safe. It's okay. It does what it does, and you don't have to get bowled over by it.
Okay. All right. Well, slowly I'm learning to make it a habit to just inquire into things. That's one thing that's coming out of this process is that anytime something happens, not entirely because, a lot of things get overlooked, but I'm noticing more and more that becomes sort of the default response. Like, okay, so what's going on here? So,
Excellent.
okay,
All right.
well,
Have a great day, and I will be in touch very soon with all the details about the everything else.
all right, well, till then, take it easy.
You too. Thanks again.
All right,
Bye.
bye.